Welcome to Transformation Accelerated, Changing the Game's webcast series, where we speak to standout leaders who have reshaped their organization and often the whole sector they inhabit. For more information on Changing the Game, grab a copy of the book, Changing the Game, the Playbook for Leading Business Transformation, published by Wiley and available wherever you are, or in fact, there's a free chapter on our website. Or contact us direct at ctgplaybook.com regarding game-changing online training, consultancy, or speaking engagements. We hope you enjoy the webcast. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Paul Smitton. Paul is Director of Customer Lifestyle at Cathay Pacific Airways, also CEO and Managing Director of Asia Miles, and also Chairman of Cathay Pacific Holidays. So welcome, Paul.
Thank you, Graham. Good to be here.
That's a fantastic array of responsibilities you hold, but I thought it might be a good start to the webcast for you to maybe paint a broader picture of your career to date.
Sure, happy to do so. Look, large part of my career has been in the kind of loyalty marketing space, often in airlines. So I've worked around the world in places like Qantas in Sydney and Virgin in the UK. But also have worked in loyalty consulting. So I've been in a number of different sectors as well, so hotels, retail, and the like. So always sort of customer focused, building relationship with your consumers, so that you can engage with them, and then ideally build long-term value for the business off the back of good customer engagement. So currently been in, my role with Cathay now for the last 4 years up in Hong Kong. So one of the world's most highly recognized brands from a customer service perspective, regularly rates in the sort of top 2 or 3 airlines in the world for customer service. So that's exciting to be in a brand like this.
And you're, I think, the epitome of the international executive, because you sort of hinted on that. You've worked across Europe, also in where else in the globe have you worked?
Yeah, gosh, I have actually lived and worked in 7 countries and done 11 international moves. So I've done a few countries more than once, but ranging from the US to the UK to Switzerland, India, New Zealand, Australia, Hong Kong. So yeah, quite a few places. Travel on a British passport primarily, but I also carry a Australian and Kiwi passports too. So yeah, bit of a real life.
Maybe always have a suitcase at the ready. You never know.
Yeah.
But Hong Kong's been home for 4 years now, and obviously fantastic
Sure.
progress and leadership in the Cathay Pacific Group. So congratulations on that.
Thanks.
Look, I thought perhaps as a scene setter, it might be useful to sort of delve into and hear from you what are the obvious and perhaps not so obvious ways in which the pandemic has impacted aviation and the travel sector generally.
Yeah, look, the travel was probably the biggest sector to be hit right from the beginning of the pandemic, and so now just going past its 2nd anniversary. Seems to have been the new normal for now anyway. Let's hope there'll be a new normal that comes beyond COVID. But in travel, yeah, it's been quite tremendously hit. I would say too that Cathay's probably been, if not the worst hit, it's been one of the worst hit, largely because Hong Kong it's not a country, it's a city, a special administrative region of China, and so we don't have a domestic market. We're just a city location, so there's no domestic travel for us, and then the international travel side of it has been really heavily impacted because of the very strict what is now called dynamic zero COVID strategy that Hong Kong's employed, which has largely protected the population from the disease, but it has meant that the airline's been pretty severely hit. At our peak, we were doing 35 million passengers a year pre-pandemic, and about 100, which worked out at about 100,000 a day, thereabouts. And we've been operating below 1,000 a day quite regularly. So 1 to 2% of the normal total. So you can imagine quite an incredible impact. Luckily, we're also a cargo airline, and Hong Kong is one of the world's biggest air cargo hubs. We move products that are manufactured in southern China to the rest of the world, and that's been a big part of it and of our business. And so luckily we had that. Without it, it would have been even more challenging. We also have a pretty successful loyalty business, with significant sort of credit card revenues as well. So the domestic Hong Kong base spending on their cards has delivered some revenue as well. So it's not all sort of doom and gloom, but the passenger side's been really severely impacted for sure.
And I'm interested in terms of 4 years within the group. Let's say 2 and a bit years of that has been the pandemic. What areas of transformation did you observe? Throughout that time, and what areas have you been specifically involved with?
Yeah, look, great question. And I think the challenge, I think, in an environment like this is there's a short-term need to preserve cash flow. As your revenues take a hit, you need to try and make sure that you're not burning too much cash, or ideally get to positive cash flow as quickly as possible. And so there's sort of that short-term focus, but there's also, you need to also make sure you're not forgetting the future. And so that's the tricky balance. How do you make sure you're not neglecting your future? Because there will be a recovery. And so what we've been trying to do, and I think quite successfully, is look at transformation initiatives. It was interesting. I remember presenting to our board about 12 months ago. And one of the things he mentioned, this board director, was he remembered being in our first class lounge, and he noticed a small crack in the marble on the first class bar. Right. And he used it as a metaphor. His comment was, what I don't want to see when I fly again in 1 year or 2 years time, I don't want to see that crack. I want to know that you've been fixing things while I was away. So he wanted us to make sure we fixed the crack first and foremost. It was a literal yes. element to it as well, yeah. Which we have, to be clear. But there is also the metaphor being, what else have you done? And that have that feeling of, gee, while I was away, you've really looked at your business in a thoughtful way, and it's interesting and it's better. So we've been looking at food and beverage, and we've been looking at our digital offering. We've been looking at our loyalty program, all the different products that we offer. How do we make them better so that when the business comes back, it's a nice surprise? I remember a few years ago, Volvo ran a very successful campaign, advertising campaign, when they had injected some new flair into their product design, and they sort of historically were famous for being the classic sort of suburban car, 2.5 kids, suburban house, white picket fence, and they showed an astronaut returning from space, having been away for a very long time, and seeing this fancy Volvo car on the tarmac, and the comment was, "How long have I been away?" This sort of oh my gosh, this brand is transformed. And I think that's sort of the kind of thing we want to try and leave with our consumers, so that when they do return, they're suitably impressed with what we've been doing. So I could run a whole list of stuff.
It sounds like there's been you've taken the opportunity to have, a root and branch overhaul of that customer experience and that customer journey and the whole product piece.
Yeah. Totally, yeah. I could give you a whole list of examples. Maybe just touch on one or two.
Yeah,
but
please.
So the digital experience, we've transformed the way our apps work. We have a new website design. We've got 2 new apps that we've transformed. We've also combined our loyalty programs. We used to have essentially 3 different consumer programs. You could become a registered user on our website. You could become a member of Asia Miles to collect miles, and you could also join our lounge program called Marco Polo, which is sort of a recognition program. So we've taken the chance to say, well, there's some logic around those 3 different programs and in terms of the original design, but actually it creates a whole extra layer of complexity and confusion. So bringing them all together. So we've actually now brought them together as a single program, which offers everything. We've simplified the enrollment, made it easy to sign up in the same way, an Amazon or any sort of modern retailer would make it very easy to sign up, reducing the number of fields, taking away the joining fee for the lounge program, just really, really simplifying it. We've also simplified the naming convention. So we now have Cafe as our master brand, and the word Pacific has been dropped from the master brand. So we have that sitting at the top level. Cathay Pacific is still our premium airline brand, but we also have Cathay Shopping, Cathay Credit Cards, Cathay Insurance, Cathay Wellness. And so it's a way of just elevating and simplifying the brand. And the positioning is to be more of what we're calling a premium travel lifestyle brand. We're not trying to be just an airline. We're trying to be an airline that has more. And this whole premium travel lifestyle positioning is what we've gone for.
Out of interest, I mean, so what I'm hearing is a huge amount of complexity, some big heavy lifting in terms of architecture around the business and what it does and how it does it. How did the business go about prioritizing those short, medium, and long-term opportunities?
Yeah, look, great question. I think short-term, what are the things, like anything, you can end up doing sort of a classic sort of 2x2 where you look at short-term, long-term value, and then the cost to get there, investment required, whether that's time or resources. And then things that are have got a great return and they're not that expensive to do, obviously just try and get on and do those as quickly as possible. Things that maybe are less clear in terms of value and they're hard to do, just stop doing them. So there's been a real focus on allocating capital to the things that are going to be give a good return and in the shorter term, and then focus on some of the bigger projects which we think will have a longer term value and we should just get on and do. If it's unclear what the return is, and for example, focusing on travel right now, we've really cut back on our marketing spend because there's just not enough supply in the market given the restrictions that we have. So it's just a constant sort of practical approach to building for the future, but making sure you're sensible with cash today.
And have I'm not necessarily in your divisions, but maybe broadly, I'm assuming a business of that size will have outside parties and outside resources which will help in certain key areas. Is that changed over the last 2 years in terms of consultancy help, or the extent to which the internal team and leadership is controlling and managing the output of all this change?
Yeah, look, I think we've probably been a little bit tougher on our suppliers, consulting partners, and where we have used consulting, it's been around very specific business problems that we need solving. So we're not, again, same sort of lens, making sure we're smart with cash, but we're also building for the future. And so probably not been using too many consultants this time around. I would say most of it's been solved in-house.
That's fantastic.
But we have used a bit.
Yeah. And the thing that occurs to me is that obviously you sit at the top table, and I'm intrigued to understand what you can share with us about the support you get from the top table, from the board, from the senior leadership, and how that cascades through the business and how important that is.
Yeah, so look, I am part of what we call our management committee. So we sit as a leadership team, talking about the financial performance of the company, the issues we have in front of us, and our style as a leadership team is very much about empowering and trusting our teams as well. So we try and cascade as much as we possibly can. So we have regular business briefings that are done sort of from our auditorium to the whole group, and then we have, as a director, I do a monthly town hall to my team. I also do a weekly newsletter every Friday. I send that out at 5 o'clock, just to sort of give, I call it my five bullets. And so I just give people some thoughts that I've got. And it's all about just engaging with teams, trying to make them feel like there's light at the end of the tunnel and that we've got a good plan, that they feel engaged and a part of it. The other thing that we've done too through the pandemic is we've changed the way we work too. So we've embraced the agile at scale methodology of working. So in terms of how we organize our work, it's now been broken into smaller subgroups around specific areas. And so we've turned that into matrix teams, agile trains. So there's
cross-functional groups solving a problem.
We're running a P&L for an individual area. So so they'll come up with, so for example, the retail team, we have a e-commerce shop and physical store as well. And that retail team, they come up with their annual business plan, and that gets signed off, and then they literally get given the task to go and get their contribution, and they work as a team with an agile release train, building enhancements. There's UI, UX, there's marketing, all the product teams within there. So they have some sub squads underneath retail. So there's like pre-shop, which is talking about merchandising, ranging. There's a shop team managing the actual e-commerce and physical store. And then there's a post-shop team, which is focused on operations, support, delivery, returns, all that sort of stuff. And so that they're working quite autonomously as well. Daily stand-ups, driving the business, and then all they have to do is check in on a quarterly basis to do a sort of business review, tracking, telling the rest of the business how they're performing, but then also asking for more support if they need more funding. They need capex, they need opex, they need bureaucracy taken out of the business. They sort of are able to ask for those sort of things. And
so that happens on a quarterly basis, did you say? That sort of review.
So the team works pretty autonomously day in, day out. So they're weekly or daily stand-ups, but weekly sort of performance meetings, and they're driving to a bottom line outcome. But then the quarterly business review is when that pillar head or agile team head presents back and sort of looking forward. What do I need next quarter to get my targets? So it's interesting. So that's been a big change. The last 12 months or so, we've moved to that way of working.
And what would be the kind of lessons learned from adopting that new way of working? What sort of rules of the road that or tips that you could impart?
Yeah, look, it's great. I think we debated amongst ourselves, should we go and do a big study, go and get consultants in and help transform the business, or should we just do it? So we looked at different models. We talked to a few external people, but I think the big insight we had was, let's just start, give the team permission to learn and fail and develop it. So we didn't just sort of launch it across the whole business. We picked one area as the sort of pilot, and they had a dual mission. One, go be agile at scale, go do it, and just start learning stuff. But in parallel, make sure you're capturing things where the organization needs to change. So that keeping a little list of things which are pressure points, maybe approval processes, budget presentation, all these things that sort of just happen. If that's not helping you get to your bottom line, it's slowing you down, you have permission to call those things out and challenge us. So that was important. And I think the other thing was as a learning was making sure that the whole top table, that management committee, had all signed off on this. Like we're going to change and embrace this new way of working, and give each other permission to call each other out as well as a leadership team. So that trust and communication has been really important too. So, if I go, hey Graham, if you're CFO and you didn't give permission for this team to get their budgets approved, you need to change the process. You can't slow this team down.
Yeah. So
that were probably the big things.
I mean, thank you. I mean, that's interesting. So in a sense, whether, how visible it was collectively, the reality was that everybody was on a journey. The senior leadership team were on a journey. They were looking around each other. There would probably be some that would be very gung-ho and very, very lean in. There'd be ones that would be no doubt slightly on the fence, and there might have been some in there that would have been slightly pessimistic about the change. But everyone was, as you say, given permission to get stuck in, fail, but in the end win through. And that was exactly the same as initially that first test group, and then the broader business. And so it's a great way that I guess what I'm hearing is an organism can really adapt as one, although everyone is doing their own thing.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think that's right. I think just as an organism, that's a really interesting way of putting it, right? And just doing it organically. I think when you try and just go push this down from the top, get external help or get a team together to sort of develop a plan.
Yeah.
It's not the same as when you build it yourself and own it. So that team that built it themselves and owned it, they felt like they were being pioneers within the company as well, and could shape what was going to work. So we things like Kanban boards within the team. Some of that we experimented with, and some early formats of that didn't quite work, and others worked really well. So it's just a process where we adopted our own version. We also played with naming conventions as well, so that we had a common language. And again, we didn't adopt everything. We just tried to develop our own methodology that we thought would work for us.
Very
so
powerful.
We've ended up, it's good.
Very powerful, because I mean, I think one of the purposes of Michael Vullings and I writing the book was the sense that executives do need to take ownership of change and transformation in their organization. It's not about outsourcing, and it's not about the few coming in externally and telling everybody how it needs to go. It needs to come organically from within. And in order to do that, executives need to know how to do it well. And so it's a fantastic case study in empowering people to do that at such a grand scale as well. I mean, that's really quite impressive. And we've talked a bit about, we've talked a bit about, if I use a aviation metaphor, apologies, but we've talked a lot about headwinds due to COVID. There seems like there was a bit of a good tailwind in terms of the opportunity that was afforded to the business because of COVID to make all these changes. I wonder, are there any other sort of surprising tailwinds that presented themselves over the last year or two, which might be a byproduct of something else, something which you felt, well, actually I didn't see that one coming, and that's positive.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. One I would say is that I think through a crisis, the organization can either get stronger or go the other way and get weaker. And I think through the crisis, there's been a sense within the company that we're all in this together, right? That we've got each other's backs, and I think that's been a really positive thing. I really hope that coming out of the pandemic, we build on that. We continue to build on that. So, so that's been one of the neat things about this. I would say. I'd say also, organizationally, Swire is our majority owner of Cathay, and Swire is a company that's got a 200+ year history, and so going back as an old British trading company with a view that we're here for the long term, and things come and go. That good times come, bad times come. We take a long-term view, and that permission to say, let's make sure we take the sensible decisions right now, but let's not be too negative. Let's make sure we think about the long term on this. It's interesting. The last year, I remember our chairman, he was talking about the early stage of the pandemic, and he found a speech that was written by his grandfather, and he'd written the speech in the 60s, I think it was, after the company had been around for about 150 years in Hong Kong. And he talked about how he had joined the business in the early 1900s, and he'd been in the company for 50 years at this point. And he had to leave Hong Kong to go and fight in World War One. His brother died in the trenches, and then he returned to Hong Kong after World War One. Had to leave again when the Japanese invaded, and so then returned to Hong Kong again in 45. And the whole business, basically during the Japanese occupation, the whole business had been destroyed. Big dockyards in the east of Hong Kong Island. A whole suburb actually called Taiku, which is the Chinese name for Swire. And all of that had been completely destroyed. And so he had to then rebuild the business in the late 40s. And so, the reason our chairman was reading this speech was he just wanted to say, look, we've been through some pretty tough times in the past, and we've always come through it. We will come through this again. Keep believing. I believe in you. I trust you. I value you. So that sort of top-down support and leadership, I think, is just incredible, right? If you have a leader who inspires that confidence in you,
inspiring is the word. That's right.
It's incredible, right? You then feel confident and relaxed in your role to do what you need to do. Right? You're not looking over your back, looking over your shoulder, worrying that you're in trouble. Right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Oh, what a great story. Thanks for sharing. I wanted to move away specifically, I guess, from aviation, travel, tourism sector, and maybe pull back a step, just into the broader space around customer transformation and different marketplaces. And obviously, you are, or dare I say, a veteran of that particular space. What do you think, from your own perspective, will be the sort of transformative changes that brands in different sectors will try to, or will need to execute in a post-pandemic world?
Yeah, look, I think there's a lot of stuff which will maybe not change that much, and other things that will change dramatically. It's a pretty obvious thing to say, but I think at its core, being offering value, understanding your consumers, and offering something that is unique. I think that's always been important, and is just going to be important into the future as well. I think there's a lot of talk about the disruption that's coming to travel, and people are using Zoom, like we're using Zoom now. But will they always want to do that? Will they want to get out and meet people again? And I think a lot of the research we've seen says that people are desperate to get back out and visit the world, see friends, see family, do business. And so I think it's hard to predict what will happen, but you've got to be careful you don't sort of. I think there's a human tendency, right? In the middle of a crisis, you tend to be a little bit more pessimistic than you probably should be.
Yeah.
Equally, when things are going really well, often human tendency is to be a little bit more optimistic than you probably should be. And so I think there's probably not a massive course correct, but there will be some things that will come, and we just need to keep making sure we're aware of those things, and we're prepared for the future. I mean, there's things like NFTs and the metaverse. Would there be a total recall kind of world where people aren't actually traveling? They're using memory implants to have virtual memories. Who knows, right? But I suspect our job is to make, we take a long-term view, don't jump on every single fad, but also try and make sure we build a business that understands its customers and be relevant into the future. And try and be nimble.
Not jumping on every fad, I guess that's a great point. And not that I'm suggesting digital is a fad, it clearly isn't, but a lot of companies have obviously focused on digital transformation as a sort of key tranche in terms of what they're trying to do. And customer and marketing function have been very early and eager adopters, I think it's fair to say, going back a decade or more of ever more complex, ever more intelligent technologies. Where do you think the customer function is vis-a-vis digital transformation? Do you think it's still at the start of what will end up being an ever-going digital transformation? Do you think it's maturing in its understanding of digital and how it can be applied into the customer paradigm? Or do you think that there are other areas that customer and marketing people should be looking beyond technology solutions per se?
Yeah, look, it's great. I mean, I'm really lucky in that I've got a role which encompasses digital experience. So I look after the websites, the digital apps. I look after the brand insights, marketing, and I look after customer and all our non-airline product offerings. So retail, insurance, the loyalty program, credit cards, etc., hotels, holidays.
A lot of touch points.
And so I've got, so it's great. So I've got, having all those different components means that I've got a lot of the component parts where I can, put into play a lot of this digital transformation, customer engagement, etc. So for me, it's a never-ending journey. So digital experience, making sure we're listening to our customers, bringing in the insights from our research team, using the big data platforms we have around understanding the different segments that are in our base, and then designing those digital experiences and those products to be relevant. That's a never-ending journey. But in its simple terms, I so often go back to sort of real customer lifecycle marketing type principles. If you think about that, it's really about acquisition of customers, building known relationships, activating them, upselling them, cross-selling them, getting them to buy more things, spend more of their wallet with you, and retain them for longer and win them back when they churn, right? So a lot of it is those sort of real marketing 101 type principles. And then if you think of it like that, you then can kind of build the insights, make sure you're learning, do the product design, the digital design that sort of then is matching those different segments to make sure you're finding all the opportunities to retain customers and grow. So so it's good. I think we're on a journey, always never ending, probably. And so as we also think about the fact that we're kind of a east-west company, we have we have to be relevant in all the Western digital channels, but we also have to be relevant at all the mainland Chinese channels. So we sort of have to be in that stack as well with our consumers in that market. So there's a never-ending job just to keep evolving that. I mean, just for example, we just updated our WeChat mini program just this week, in fact. And so that's a job that just constantly needs attention to make sure we're doing the right thing in the different geographies that we operate. Yeah,
again, highly complex. Just mindful of time, but one thing which I always like to ask is, where do you draw inspiration from, and what sort of companies or brands or businesses do you think are, in a sense, you're envious of? You think, well, they're doing a great job transforming themselves from A to B to C, or that initiative was standout. Where do you get your inspiration from?
Yeah, I wouldn't like to say it's any one source, but I like to read, I like to listen, I like to observe from all different sectors. So I get a lot of inspiration from a number of different podcasters that I like to listen to on a regular basis.
So what are your favorites?
My probably number one would be a podcast called Pivot, which has become pretty popular around the world in the last few years. So Scott and Kara, and that's a regular must listen. But I also enjoy people like Tim Ferriss, who wrote the 4-Hour Work Week. His podcast is pretty inspiring as well. So sometimes it's completely different sectors. I also look at other industries as well. Brands like Nike with some of their sustainability focus, and also their trying to stand for something beyond the product. So that's there's some areas in that space which are really fascinating. So always looking at different companies for inspiration all the time, right? Try and bring it back. And as a premium brand, right, we need to be focused on really fantastic content creation and curation, so that people aren't just coming to us to buy a ticket from A to B. We want them to come to us because we are offering something that's a little bit more that's more enriching. And so we have to just be constantly focused on content creation and curation. That's a big part of what we do as well. So, for example, I want to go to Japan on a vacation. That might be the original thought that bubbled in someone's head. Probably not going to go to the airline website first up unless we offer something more interesting. So we're focusing on building content, telling people about experiences, what they can do that might be a little bit different. And hopefully that'll inspire them in the planning phase. And then hopefully we might get a hotel booking through our hotel booking engine, and then hopefully we'll get them to buy the flight on us as well. So there's a real focus on how do we build more around
Share wallet.
Planning, inspiring, and then hopefully the business will come as well.
Yeah. Look, that's fantastic, Paul. I mean, one last question I've got is, again, insights from someone who's been there and done it. If I paint the picture of maybe a senior leader or an executive in a large scale business that's staring down the barrel of needing to architect change hasn't yet been given the mandate, but can see that themselves, can see the need for change, and feel that they want to be the instigator of that. What's the first few steps they might take in trying to create that mandate for themselves, and to bring that to fruition?
Yeah, look, I think it depends where you're at your career, I would say, but equally, I think in anybody's career at any time, don't give up on those thought bubbles, right? If you see something that you think should be changed, don't give up on those thoughts. I say this when I'm hiring people into my company. I'm hiring you, Graham Christie, because you've got some experience and you've got something about you which is unique to you. If I try and turn you into a Cathay Pacific robot like the rest of us, I'm not going to get the best out of you, right? I want diversity in every shape and size it comes, right? So I want people to be bringing their thought bubbles, right? Yeah. And if you come in and go, why do you do it like this? I don't understand. I love questions like that, and it's brilliant, right? Because you just keep questioning things, and it allows you to evolve and get better. So, and I think it's relevant for anybody in their career in a company to be like that within your company, to ask those questions without fear of failure. And I think when you get to a point where you're a bit more senior, you probably have a few more runs on the board where you can and some more credits that you can burn. So for me, it's probably a lot easier. But equally, I would say for younger people in organizations, if that organization is not giving it to you, not listening to you, you know, your capital can and your thinking can go somewhere else, right? So don't let the machine beat you down.
Yeah, that's right. Keep it real.
Be yourself. Yeah, totally.
Great advice. Great tip. Thanks for that.
Mm.
Okay, so what's the best way that people can get in touch with you, Paul? Is that LinkedIn the best way of doing that?
Yep, absolutely. So I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. I like to get two or three things out every week. So I'm usually on there. You can jump on and follow me, or you can connect either way.
Fantastic. Great. Well, look, I've really enjoyed the conversation. Thanks for being so open about really just the great stuff that's been happening within Cathay, and you know, the journey that the business and businesses within the group have been on, and your leadership around that's really valuable insight. Just a reminder to everybody else, you can follow us on ctgplaybook.com, where you'll see more Transformation Accelerated webcasts, and more information about online training and consultancy. And Paul, once again, thank you very much indeed. Thanks for being part of it.
Thank you, Graham. Enjoyed it.